Hey everyone, I'm back. I'm standing now. My bed looks just as bad as it did before, but now you can't see it. Instead, you can see that I have nothing on my walls because they're just white and there's nothing on them because I'm a maniac. It's 1 a.m. My window's open. My neighbors are being forced to listen to this entire script, and that's what they get for living in the suburbs. I don't know what to say. Um, so I've been reading Best Served Cold for a bit, or well, I I had it marked on Goodreads as I've been reading it for a bit. But then I saw on Daniel Green's channel that like a First Law movie was announced, and I was like, well, I'm a simp for the algorithm. So I was like, all right, time to ride that wave. So I'm gonna read this book pretty quickly, and so I knocked it out over a week, and then I wrote the script, and I did the Face in the Frost video, and now it's been another week, so it's been 2 weeks, and the movie doesn't even have a date. No one gives a fuck, right? The interest, it was there for like a day, right? It's too late for me, but we're here now. So, here's my Best Served Cold review. There's a lot to love in Best Served Cold. Let me do a quick synopsis. All right, before I get too into it. Best Served Cold is a revenge story set in the First Law universe that roughly follows the cast of 7 or so main characters. It is, at the surface, about one woman getting revenge on 7 people who conspired to kill her by killing them. That's the revenge. The revenge is her killing these people. But that's just the surface, right? This book definitely has some deeper themes beyond simple revenge, yada yada yada. I would sure fucking hope so. It's 230,000 words long. It took me a whole week. So why not start there? Sorry, I accidentally skipped a few sections. What is the theme of Best Served Cold? What I thought was most interesting is like, first of all, this is a book about people. All of Joe Abercrombie's works are books about characters, right? More so than maybe any other author or most other authors, right? Every character is clearly defined and, motivated by their own thoughts and their own actions to the point where I actually barely even talk about it in this review because if you've read any of his other work, the characters are good. That's just a given. But first of all, this is how people and how they change, right? Towards the end of the book, and don't worry, this is not a big spoiler. Casca notes sometimes men change for the better, sometimes men change for the worse, and often, very often, given time and opportunity, they change back. At the very end of the book, and we're forced to think about how our cast changes, and why, right? Like, why did Monza change? How did Monza change? How did Shivers change? And it's a bit of a gut punch, right? Like at the end, I will say they didn't all change for the better, but they also all didn't change for the worse. Also, this is a book about how structural and systemic powers can change us and our moral systems. And not to go too off topic here, but this is kind of what this channel is. So Trevor Noah made a video in 2021 about the policing system in America, right? In that video, he notes that even if there were good apples in policing, they don't act to stop the bad apples, right? Because they know if they do something, they will be going against the system. And he ends that video by saying, we're not dealing with bad apples. We're dealing with a rotten tree. And that tree is bearing the fruits that it was intended to. And I'm not saying Joe Abercrombie is writing narrative about police reform. That's silly, right? Especially because it's Abercrombie in 2009. It's just not that. Oh my god, the fucking train. It's just not a lot. But Abercrombie, in his desire to show the gritty, dark reality of the world and how powerless we are in it, right, or whatever, against systems of power, does write about power, right? A lot of his work is about power. He does write about power. A lot of his work is about power, how people come into power, how people hold on to power, etc. And that way, it becomes about politics, right? And kind of over and over throughout the book and all First Law, it's noted everyone kneels to someone, and obviously Valentin Bach, as a bank, were constantly shown how they have so much power over the world, um, and how they promote violence through their money and their power over it. And that's just one half of the main conflict in the First Law world, right? Not there's a whole religious thing, the inner like in inside each country there's conflict, and then between countries there's conflict, and so on. So there is quite a complicated political scheme, and it's one of the things that keeps me coming back to these books, right? Um, so yeah, I think Abercrombie does put forward some sort of in not analysis necessarily, but observations about systemic power here that um, I don't think that fantasy books will ever really be sufficient as political education. I think shooting for that as a goal is a little mm, eh, but I do think reading in general promotes um promotes some things that really put someone on the right path to understanding the world we're in, right? So moving on to some literary elements. Of course, it's Abercrombie. I already said it. The characters are all memorable. Each character is clearly self-motivated. Their motivations are what clearly push the plot forward. I think the most interesting thing about this book, or the most impressive thing, was the use of third-person narration. Is crazy, right? Because you can tell exactly what character you are, getting into, because each chapter might be a different POV. You can tell exactly what POV you're in based on how they think, right? Abercrombie changes not necessarily his writer's voice entirely. He does a very distinct writer's voice, but he can change it significantly enough that each character sounds different. Versus, in like Mistborn, everyone, the brains are all the same, right? Um, and the prose remains decent. I kind of, as I said there, Abercrombie continues his trademark tradition of repeating a phrase over and over as part of characterizations, and it still works well. The story, it's fine. Abercrombie is still good at subverting and shaking out like power and what the conclusion is at the end. Um, and relatively for fantasy, it was creative, right? It was not like it was a revenge story, but it was definitely not cliche. But this one, and I brought it up a little, like kind of offhand earlier. This one stretched out a while, right? The plot was established very early and proceeded, right, like with regularity for a pretty good chunk of the book. Oops, without too many twists. Which is just my main criticism of the book. It's just too fucking damn long. It's way too damn long. They could have montaged. They're killing 7 people. They could have montaged quite a few of them, and yeah, it just didn't need to be 230,000 words. And it does do a lot. The middle drags on. The world building's a bit lackluster. It's kind of sad for a series on book 4 and out of 9 at this point. And the plot struggled to keep me motivated after page 400. I think I would have dropped it if I wasn't reading it for this review, to be honest. And okay, also there's this scene. This is a spoiler, alright? So like, but like, who gives a fuck, right? Like, I mean, I'll put a timestamp. You can skip the section. I'll put in the YouTube like timestamp thing where the spoiler is. Um, but also the scene where there's a 2v1 with like anime mid fight dialogue killed me. Okay, like it. Fuck. Anime mid fight dialogue killed me. Okay, so like, I'll quote it right now. This is the spoiler. Is there no end to the surprises the world throws up? Ganmark undid the top button of his jacket and pulled a handkerchief from it, dabbed at the bleeding cut on his face, then carefully wiped Cellier's blood from the blade of his sword. It's true then. You are still alive. He gave his weak smile, and his damp eyes drifted down to her sword. Fighting left-handed. Oh, this is a different quote. He gave his weak smile, and his damp eyes drifted down to her sword. Fighting left-handed? Thought I'd give you some kind of chance. The least I can do is extend to you the same courtesy. He flicked his sword smartly from one palm to the other, switched his guard, and pointed the blade towards her. There's another quote. She heard boot heels clicking away from her on cobbles and slowly raised her head. Gonmark hooked his foot under the calvas and flicked it up into his waiting hand. One touch to me, I'd rather think. He tossed the sword arrow-like and it thumped into the turf beside her, waddling gently back and forth. What do you say? Shall we make it the best of 3? Like, please stop. Ganmark is so fucking weird for the First Law universe. Like, what do you mean best of three? Every other character in this fucking universe would kill anyone instantly. Um, and like it's just odd. That scene also ends really weird, but that's an even bigger spoiler. So okay, should you read Best Served Cold? It depends on how tolerant your upper length, right? If you are running out of books to read and you generally don't have any problem with long books, sure, read it. Why not? You know, that's its only main issue. There's nothing really major going on otherwise. If you're short on time or like being economical with your reading, it depends, right? I honestly might recommend skipping it unless you feel very invested into all of the First Law universe. Um, but my opinion may change as I read the next few standalones in the next trilogy, which I will have reviews of the first trilogy, the three standalones, the third trilogy, and then also all 9 books. So those will each be separate reviews. So if the as those come out, if you are curious, feel free to hold off on reading it until I get there, and then feel free to go off of what I say then. Um, and that's it. That's Best Served Gold. This is a long video. I really wanted to get these reviews under 5 minutes. I will probably do, yeah, let's say I'll do a 1 minute YouTube short and like a TikTok video for this one too, because um, maybe that's a better balance of quick firing. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, thank you for watching. This has been Standing Monty. Also, tomorrow's Pride here in Columbus, so I have to get up early tomorrow. So this is what I'm doing instead of sleeping. All right. Good night.